Hello, buenas tardes. Hello and welcome to today's very special webinar as part of the Wine on Earth Taste-a-Thon, a series of virtual tasting and talks hosted by some of the world's most renowned wine regions, all in one day, today. And well, location matters. And this special day, this very special day, is promoted by Wine Origins, which is an association of the 31 most renowned wine regions in the world to defend the wine region's name and the origin by educating both consumers and professionals about the importance of location to wine making. My name is Carmen Aumesquet, and I'm the marketing director of the Regulatory Council here in Jerez. I'm at the winery, at the bodega in the Consejo Regulador in Jerez. And well, just to introduce myself, I have dedicated most of my professional career to the promotion and education of sherry wines, both here in Spain and internationally. So today's very special webinar will revolve around what we call the sherry ecosystem, which we think is much more than a simple wine and that represents a whole world by itself. So we will have some fantastic guests who will join us from different parts of the world, and will include some producers from Jerez, sommeliers, restaurant owners from the US, from the UK, a renowned whiskey master blender. So thank you for joining us, and over the next hour, we will explore some hot topics in this sherry ecosystem, including the terroir, the famous sherry cask and its effect on the different beverage, and how sherry is being presented and consumed today at the table around the world. So this show is being streamed live on several of our social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we encourage you to comment, to ask, and well, we will try to answer every question. If we can answer you live, we will do our best to answer them later on the social platform you have the comment on. So, well, let's get started. And our first topic will be terroir. And I am very much delighted to introduce our two first guests who are joining us today from Jerez, from the capital of sherry wines, Jerez de la Frontera, to discuss this very interesting and very important topic of terroir, the land and where the magic of sherry begins. So first, let's welcome Willy Pérez.
Hi. Hello, Carmen. How are you, everyone?
Hello, Willy. Let me introduce yourself, okay? Willy Pérez was born in Jerez de la Frontera, and he has been related to sherry ever since. He's the 5th generation of Sanluqueños winemakers, and he's also chemist and winemaker himself. Well, you, Willy, he gradually developed your relationship with the vineyard and the terroir when you discover your love for the Jerez traditions, and you have combined your work at the Bodegas Luis Pérez with many other projects, like advising wineries, working in different countries, doing research work, working in distributions, and some other sherry projects such as Bodegas de la Riva. So, wow, what an impressive CV, Willy.
Not that much. It's not that much.
Well, let us introduce our second guest, okay, for the terroir topic. And we will have Eduardo Ojeda. Eduardo, are you there?
Hello, Carmen, and good afternoon to everyone.
Hello, Eduardo. Eduardo, let me introduce you. Well, Eduardo is a dear friend, a colleague, and a pioneer of sherry wines, both nationally and around the world. Eduardo is a chemist, a winemaker, and have dedicated practically his entire professional life to sherry. Since 2000, Eduardo has been the technical director of the José Estevez Group, which includes Bodegas La Guita in Sanlúcar de Barrameda, Bodegas Marqués de Real Tesoro, and the famous Bodega Valdespino, a very special winery that makes wine in a very unique way since the 19th century, very traditional, using exclusively grapes from vineyards from the legendary Pago Macharnudo Alto. Eduardo is convinced that a wine cannot be understood without understanding the vineyard. So he is the perfect guest to discuss the terroir of sherry. Well, Eduardo, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And well, I would like, to start the show, we thought that we would start by asking a question that are commonly asked, and which is, what makes single vineyard wines so special? Willy, would you mind to be the first guest to answer? So what do you think that makes single vineyard wine so special?
Well, Carmen, the first thing we need to discuss is what is a wine for us. If we're talking about a consumer, then just enjoy the wine as an organoleptic experience, which is really good. But talking about the mainstream wine drinker, probably the single vineyard is not going to apport anything to the wine. In fact, probably this kind of consumer will, prefer a blended wine. I mean, for example, we are here in the Marco de Jerez, and if we work in the coast with a vineyard in the coast, probably the wine could be light or maybe too light. And if we move to England, maybe the wine could be too heavy. But if you blend both parcels, maybe the wine is more balanced. And probably it's going to be better organoleptic, experience for this mainstream wine drinker. But in fact, is this wine, if we're talking about a wine lover, probably it's not looking just for this organoleptic experience, just a sensitive experience, but also an emotional experience. So if we're talking about emotion, maybe we're talking also about uniqueness. This is pretty close to the concept of craft, or maybe an art piece. And this uniqueness, this sensation of drinking something that is inside your bottle, and these flavors cannot be made in another parcel, just in the parcel we're drinking. And this is quite special. And in this situation, you can have all the traceability in this parcel. You can meet the person that is working the viticulture. You can touch the vineyard, and you have a really strong relationship with the product. You have a story behind, and the story means everything when you're talking about emotions. So that's why, for what kind of consumer, maybe it's not apporting anything, but for the wine lover, the real wine lover, a single vineyard matters. It matters a lot.
So location matters, no?
Yes.
Of course. Well, Eduardo, the next question is for you. And well, as you know, we've got different classic pagos in Jerez. And just for the audience to understand and to know, each pago consists of a number of individual vineyards that share a similar soil, similar climate conditions, that can differentiate the character of the wine from one pago from another. Some examples known in the region, such as Macharnudo, Carrascal, Almina, Valvaina, Burujena, Almocadem, many of them. Can you tell us which are the factors that make the differences between the one pago or the pago from one area from another?
I have been working mainly with two different pagos, Macharnudo in Jerez for Valdespino and Miraflores in Sanlúcar for Laguita. And I can say that they are very different. Both are separated by less than 15 kilometers, and they are completely different. And with the same variety, they produce quite different wines. The climate, Sanlúcar, proximity to the sea, acts as a temperature buffer and offer more humidity. The orography and the orientation, the higher altitude in Macharnudo with smooth hills, and in Sanlúcar, Miraflores, facing to the sea. Macharnudo produce rounded wines with more body, like Willie said before, much fuller, filling the mouth, showing very stony limestone minerality. Miraflores, wines with more delicacy. They are subtle in weight, but with a very nice, for me, precision and saltiness. We can, and then if we continue with the conversation we talked to, or Willie said before, we can blend those wines, but it's very nice and very good to show the expression of a different plot in the wine, and this the expression of a soil. I think a wine has to be good, but has to show the place in the vineyard from which it comes.
Okay, right. So keeping that the identity of the wine. Very good. And talking about, because you are very much an expert on Macharnudo or Macharnudo Alto plot, and this plot is considered one of the Grand Cru of Jerez historically. Can you tell us why it is so special?
Well, Macharnudo is so special precisely because it is legendary. It has a very long history producing wines that have marked the sherry style for several centuries. This long consistency and recognition, in addition to its majestic dominance due to its altitude, only 135 meters above the sea level, but it's a majestic dominance, make it the Grand Cru of Jerez, I think.
Right. Thank you, Eduardo. And Willie, changing concerning climate change. I mean, that have increased in recent years, and it's so important. What steps are being taken in the vineyards related to this climate change?
Okay, the climate change is something very important for us and for the vineyard. As you know, the vineyard, and the weather are completely related. And the problem is we are still discussing what is going to happen in the next 50 or 100 years. And we already studied what is going to happen here in Jerez. We really don't know, yet. But we can, project the future. And it's not completely matching the big data set we have from the Junta de Andalucía. But you know, we have here the data set of Macharnudo since 1892. So we have already like 130 years of temperatures, and we can see the future, and the temperature is going hotter and hotter. And the problem with this is when you are making wine, you're going to lose the acidity. Okay, and this is really, really bad for wine, and it's really bad for Palomino. So I think we need to, start doing anything, because we as viticultors, we can't fight the climatic change. We don't have enough power. We are not government. We are not, we can't fight this, but we can start making new grapes that can resist the climatic change. As we have a really good heritage, like Palomino, since the 15th century or the 16th century, but we are pretty, comfortable with these old grapes. But I think we need to keep moving, So we're trying to blend, to hybridate different grapes, like Palomino with Tintilla. Tintilla de Rota is a native grape we have here in the Marco de Jerez, a red grape with really high acidity. But when I mean high acidity, I mean malic acid, I mean citric, succinic, which are really three-dimensional in the mouth. So we are trying to blend the flowers, which is hybridate, to obtain a new grape. And, if you put some malic in the Palomino, if you put some citric, you got this three-dimensional acidity, which is really good because it's touching a lot of parts of your mouth, not even the tartaric, which is in the deep throat. You have all this sensation. So the hybridation with Palomino, with Tintilla, or hybridation with Palomino and Vigiriega, which is another white grape here, native grape from El Marco de Jerez, I think is, good steps for the future, because probably our sons or our grandsons will ask us, why didn't you, did anything, when you have time? And we need to, work, hybridating and working in the vineyard, because, the next 50 or 100 years, we're going to have hotter temperatures and we're going to have less water. And this is, really important for viticulture.
Willy and Eduardo, unfortunately, we are running out of time. And well, we have, the time for the very last question. Please be brief in your answer. How do you conceive sustainability applied to the viticulture and wine? Please, Eduardo, if you can answer first.
Our climate makes our viticulture quite respectful, but we have to go towards a more sustainable one. Possibly clonal selection, thinking on what Willy said, thinking more in quality than in production, taking care of the yield, and leave the vines age like people. I think it's a path that must be taken, not because the wines are going to be better, but to respect our land. If we act like this, I am sure that our wines will advance in quality.
Do you have anything more to say, Willy, about this subject?
No, it was perfect. I'm agree.
Well, thank you, Willy. Thank you, Eduardo. It has been fascinating having you today. Thank you very much for joining us. And well, we need to move. So, well, cheers, salud, and we move for the next segment, for the next topic, that will be the sherry effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, around the world in the cask. Wood is the single most important thing when it comes to maturation of many distillate beverages, many liquors, including American bourbon, Irish and Japanese whiskey, Scotch whiskey, of course, and sherry wines and brandy de Jerez. So, well, we know that sherry casks have been used to age whiskey for over 200 years, but what is it about the sherry effect of the wood has got top producers? What is it about the sherry effect of the wood that has got top sherry producers from gin to beer to rum and of course whiskey, mezcal, from all over the world coming to Jerez, trying to search the perfect sherry cask? So we've got two very experienced guests in this area that will help us to learn more about this topic. So let's welcome our first guest, Rachel Barry, from Master Blender at the Glendronach, Glensalote Distillery. Sorry for the spelling, Rachel. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Rachel. Rachel is one of the world's top whiskey master blenders, also known as the First Lady of Scotch. Very impressive. And she has now been in the whiskey industry for over 28 years. So she's the master blender from Brown-Forman Scotch whiskey portfolio. Am I right?
You are absolutely correct.
And in 2019, you were the first female Scotch whiskey master blender to receive an honorary doctorate to be inducted into Whiskey Magazine Illustrious Hall of Fame. So your distillery having like pioneers using sherry casks for maturation, maturing your whiskeys in Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso sherry cask, and this method have been you have been using it for nearly 200 years. So, well, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you today. And well, I hope you are very fine. And if you don't mind, I would like to introduce the second guest as well, who is waiting to enter, Jan Peterson. So Jan Peterson is joining us from Jerez. He's the founder of Bodegas Fernando de Castilla.
Correct,
Hello?
correct. Yes, you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yep, good.
So originally from Norway, Jan, like Eduardo and Willy, has dedicated much of his life, his professional life, to sherry wines, starting at Bodegas Osborne in 1983, and later in 1999, he took over Bodegas Fernando de Castilla, where he not only produces some of our finest sherries, but also brandy de Jerez and sherry vinegar.
That's right.
On top of that, you are a collaborator, or you have collaborated with, I don't know if I'm the spelling, Glendronach Distillery.
Yes, and many others, all over the world.
Some other distilleries in the world. So, I mean, it's great to have you here and to share your experience with us. Thank you. And our first question is for Rachel. Well, when Glendronach is known for having a particularly bold and traditional style characterized by sherry cask maturation. So what do you think drew the original distillers at Glendronach to sherry cask in the first place? And what is it about their characteristic that make you now in the 21st century to keep using them?
Okay, well, going back to 1826, that's when Glendronach Distillery was established, was basically built. And at this time, the casks available were from the sherry transport casks that came in to the United Kingdom and were bottled at that point in the United Kingdom. And the casks had nowhere to go. So it was natural that they would be used for Scotch distilleries. At Glendronach, in particular, it's fascinating because where Glendronach is the same distance from the sea in all directions, pretty much north and east, as Jerez. And you know, obviously, landscape plays a part in character. Maybe to a certain degree, not quite maybe as much as sherry, but it still plays a part. And deep down in the valley of Forg, which is where the distillery is, there are lots of there's malted barley grows, there's local water, and also lots of berries grow. So the name Glendronach, you can see it here, means Valley of the Brambles or Valley of the Berries or black currants, for example. So this gives you an indication to a certain degree of the character of the still, the character from the spirit that's clear and colorless of the still. From our copper pot stills, beautiful stills, the character is actually quite winey, which is really fascinating, I find, because this comes from malted barley, but somehow during fermentation, you know, the natural microflora, and then into distillation, we get this bramble fruit, almost winey character in the spirit, as well as the malt and some deeper base notes. So, of course, with this character, first and foremost, it is the perfect spirit character, the Highland spirit character, to fill into sherry casks, because the sherry effect is complementary. It adds to the whiskey, and it's almost like wrapping Glendronach in that deep valley in a blanket. It gives it more velvet texture from the tannins in the oak, and these, obviously, the sherry butts and puncheons are large casks, and these enable a lot of oxidation as well. So if you think about the oxidative sherries, such as Oloroso, and then we have Pedro Jimenez, you know, these are ideal for Glendronach. You know, similar to what Willie was saying about the different sherries. The complement of PX and Oloroso in our maturation is really, really important, because the Oloroso sherry cask gives us the acidity, keeps that fruitiness on the side of the palate. The Pedro Jimenez cask gives us more of that depth, and it almost lifts and lengthens on the palate. So together we have this symphony of flavor that just rolls over the palate. We use Spanish oak sherry cask. So these are very similar to the original cask type that would have been found in 1826 in Scotland at that point. Obviously, since sherry maturation in Soleras happens in American oak, there's also the Spanish oak. And we prefer the Spanish oak because it gives us a duality of character from the Quercus vitrea and Quercus robur. It means that we get a lot of tannins, which is like that velvety blanket that gives us that lovely, velvety, full-bodied mouthfeel. And then also that this hybrid of oak gives us the top notes as well. Again, the tannins in the Spanish oak interact with the spirit and a little trace of copper from those copper pot stills and convert those tannins into these elegant, exquisite top notes as well. So we have this beautiful balance of top notes and base notes, of elegant fruit, and also deep, deep, deep dried fruit, and this lovely velvety, almost like leather texture as well. So incredibly complementary to the style of Glendronach and the character of Glendronach, deep in the valley of the brambles. And these casks just cannot be beaten. You know, we buy thousands of casks per year from Spain and Spanish oak, and these just cannot be beaten, because for us it is the ideal cask for Glendronach maturation.
I just thought about a question. For how long do you keep this sherry cask? I mean, how many?
Oh, it can be, I mean, we can use our casks more than once, obviously. But we at Glendronach is very long maturation. I think I heard slow and steady somewhere. It's very slow and steady maturation in these large sherry casks. So we want to have long maturation. And, a first fill, it could be this 18 years old, for example, is first fill Oloroso sherry cask. And you can see the color. This is the sherry effect as well, as how dark this color is. Natural, no added caramel. Obviously, Scotch whiskey, you can do that, but not with Glendronach. And you can see that effect. And obviously, this builds up in time. It's very complex, very slow maturation. We get a lot of esters formed. So, the sherry has a lot of esters in it, has a lot of acidity from the Oloroso. And this just creates more interaction, more oxidation over time to give us the most complex, richest taste in the world in single malt. But we can use them a second time. A second time, it's not as intense, but it certainly will give you the extraction from the oak, but less of the oak effect, and also oxidation as well.
Wow, great, thank you. And Jan, from your experience, when you receive all these distilleries from all over the world, how do you work with them to choose the perfect sherry cask for their whiskeys?
Well, the whole thing about sherry cask and our involvement with other companies around the world, sherry cask, started with, I've been surrounded by sherry casks for almost 40 years. And I've seen the effect that they've had on our brandies. Our Fernando de Castilla brandies are incredibly natural brandies. And we need the very best possible casks for our brandy. So that's where it all started, when I was scouting for prime casks for my brandy. I got to know Jim McEwan, that Rachel probably have bumped into a few times as well. And Jim asked me, Jan, can you help me to find some really great Solera casks like the ones you've been using for your brandy? And so I started working with Jim, and we found some incredible expressions with Bruichladdich. And then the people at Bruichladdich started to talk. The Scotch whiskey trade is very much like the sherry trade. We all know each other, and the relationship is very good. So the people at Bruichladdich started to talk to others, and we've slowly developed sort of a network of like-minded people. We are a small, quality-focused producer of sherry and brandy, and we really like to work with smaller distilleries in Scotland. Probably about half a dozen companies that have a cask from us. In Ireland, in Tasmania, in Taiwan, Japan, but never very large volumes, because I think there's like two worlds of sherry cask. The sort of sherry casks that are high quality casks that come to Jerez, filled with wine for a certain period, and then shipped back to mainly Scotland. And then there are these Solera casks that are rarer, and there's not too many that have been used for sherry for a very long time in Soleras. And this is mainly or I would say only what we do. We find casks that have contained high quality sherry for a very long period. And I know my friends, this is not really our business, but when I have something very special, I got a batch of Moscatel casks from Chipiona, Moscatel de Chipiona. There are very few of those, and I call up one of my people that I know have a whiskey that could, and are very interested in innovation and experimentation. And later this month, we're shipping a batch of old casks having contained Moscatel de Chipiona for a long time. And we've also been shipping, small amounts of casks, not only for whiskey, but I've shipped some casks to Newport, port wine producer. We've shipped casks to a very good friend of mine in the cava industry, small, extremely premium cava producer, experimenting with cava and fino casks. And actually, a company I'm involved with called Equipo Navazos. Well, Eduardo and I, they have been experimenting as well with, sort of the sherry flavors, sort of combined with cava, and all these things are very interesting. And I think this is a little bit what we see in all this, that we really want to source some very special casks and get them to the right destination.
And Rachel, complementing Jan's testimony, what do you look for in a sherry cask? Any specific property, or you just chose the type of sherry that content? You have talked about Oloroso, San Pedro Jimenez. Do you come personally to the sherry land, to the sherry region to choose, or how do you organize that?
Well, as I mentioned, maybe just a coincidence where Glendronach is relative to the sea and Jerez. The sherry is just very complementary, as you say. But other distilleries might do things differently. Also work with Benriach and experimented with Moscatel casks. As well as Pedro Jimenez, and with something like Glenglassaugh, which is our coastal distillery right on the shore on the north coast, experimenting with Manzanilla would be very, very complementary to the style. So, it's just imagining, it's almost like the terroir from Spain and the terroir from Scotland. The magic happens when there is these combinations that just work. They amplify each other. They work together like a symphony. It's nature and of course nurture as well, as we look after the whiskey as it breathes for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, even more, 60 years in a sherry cask.
Do you think there is any best sherry style to season the boot, or, well, depending on...
It depends. I like Pedro Jimenez, although it's very, very sweet. It's beautiful. And Oloroso. But I think Oloroso combined with Pedro Jimenez is just amazing, because you get the full body, you get the flavor, the acidity, balance, the richness. It just enriches the whole character. So that's my favorite combination. But I also enjoy, I love all sherry. So, Amontillado, I quite like as well, the nuttiness, and also Manzanilla. I like that little hint of salt when I'm, working with my coastal malt. So it's not one best character, I don't think. I think it is just you bring out the character of the distillery through the sherry cask. It does that job for us, bringing the character to life and enriching it. But yeah, I love Spanish oak. American oak is good as well. Maybe for other distilleries, Spanish oak is best for Glendronach because of the velvety effect on the warmth of the character from the Spanish oak.
Thank you, Rachel. And Jan, to close this topic, could you tell us about the sherry effect, the sherry cask effect on your brandies? I mean, of course, we take this for granted, but it's very, very important. The most important thing in our brandy de Jerez that is mature and aged in our sherry cask. Which type of cask or what sherry cask do you use to mature your brandies in bodegas Rey Fernando de Castilla?
Well, I think the casks basically. The casks are incredibly important, and many distillers like ourselves and we tend to find that the flavor profile of a spirit like whiskey or brandy, more than 50% of the flavor profile comes from the casks. So the casks are incredibly important, and they have to match. They have to match the product that's the craft of the cellar master, the distillers, to find the right casks for the right type of product. And in the case of Fernando de Castilla, our style is sort of like lighter and drier than most brandies de Jerez. So although I really like Rachel said, I really like Pedro Jimenez in whiskey, because the whiskey has a very prominent character, and the Pedro Jimenez doesn't really sort of like overpower the whiskey. So if you use Pedro Jimenez cask for whiskey, I really like the result, especially if it's a finish. Say like a year and a half or 2 years in Pedro Jimenez casks. It gives a very, very good effect. For our particular company, we use mainly Oloroso. We do have tiny batch of Pedro Jimenez casks, Amontillado cask, and like 6-7 years ago, Eduardo was kind enough to send me 5 casks of incredibly good Fino from his company, and we filled it with a very light Hollanda, very light brandy, and in very good Fino casks. And the result is amazing. I tasted it the other day. So there are if you have something like that, a very light brandy, a Fino or Manzanilla cask can be a very good option.
Right.
But in our case, we for our own purpose we use mainly Oloroso, and we use also mainly American oak. We do have French oak, we do have Spanish oak, because I like to play around with things, because I learn. That's part of the joy of this business, that you can look at the results of different things. So, but if you ask, what's the main type of wood used here, it's Oloroso American oak casks, 500-600 liters.
Thank you very much, Jan. Thank you very much, Rachel. Well, we're running out of time. It has been great having you. It's a fantastic topic, very, very, very interesting, and discuss it with you both has been a privilege for everyone. So thank you for making the time to join us from Scotland.
Thank you, Carmen.
And well, see you soon, maybe in Jerez, Rachel.
Yes, please. I hope so. I hope soon.
Salud and goodbye.
Salud. Slanjava, as we say. I have whiskey.
Adios. Thank you. Bye bye. Well, our final segment today in this sherry ecosystem will explore the diversity of sherry and how to serve it. From bone dry to super sweet, you know that sherry can offer a multitude of pairing options, from the most delicate dishes to very spicy, very exotic. So we admit that this is one of the greatest prides as Jerezanos, as sherry winemakers, when we see how our wines are enjoyed by cultures from all over the world. So it's also important to point out that mixologists have also used sherry in cocktails since the beginning of the 19th century. So, well, let's now talk about this versatility and how to use sherry, how to enjoy sherry to enhance any dining experience. And for this, we've got two very special guests, one coming from the UK, Richard Bigg, and one coming from the US, Tonya Pitts. The first guest, our first guest is Richard Bigg. He's no stranger to sherry wines and gastronomy, and he has been recognized by both his peers and the industry here in Jerez as a pioneer in starting the Spanish tapas and sherry revolution in the UK. He's owner of 3 restaurants known as Camino and Bar Pepito as well. And Richard has started first Camino restaurant in 2007, which to this day has one of the most extensive and well-curated Spanish and sherry wine lists in London. He also regularly visits Spain to keep on top of the latest trends about wine and gastronomy, and taking back his learnings to fuse these with both local and Spanish produce to create his delicious menus. So Richard, hola Richard, hello.
Hola Carmen, and hi everybody, and thanks so much for inviting me onto the show. It's with such a prestigious company.
It's a pleasure for us having you today, joining today, and it's great to have your testimony. Let me introduce Tonya, who is joining us from San Francisco. Well, Tonya Pitts has been in the restaurant industry for over 30 years, most of that time working as sommelier. So for the past 13 years, she has been the wine director of One Market Restaurant, which is a kind of San Francisco institution with one of the city's most impressive wine programs. And well, she's judge of many international wine competitions, speakers at the Culinary Institute of America Summit, tasting panelists, advisors. So, well, thank you very much. It's a privilege to have you joining us from the US.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me today and letting me bring a little bit of San Francisco and what we do with sherry within our menus and our tasting program. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. Well, to start the segment, we are here in Jerez always quite curious about how professionals from all over the world, like you, from the UK or from the US, how was your first experience? How you first experienced sherry, and also how do you present it to your customers in a daily basis? Sonia, would you like to start, please?
So I have a spirits list, and within that spirits list, there's also aperitifs, digestives, and dessert wines. And sherries are presented that way. But what I always like to do is to basically, I like to suggest things to people that are out of the norm, that also kind of takes them out of their comfort zone in a way, but also to teach them something new and different. And for a lot of people, sherry is something that they think you end a meal with. Most people don't know a lot about sherry, and they don't realize that, yes, sherry is made from grapes as well. So it's a fantastic alternative to having a glass of wine. And you don't need a lot. A little bit goes a really long way. And I had so much fun with our chef, Mark Doman, last night. As you know, in San Francisco and California, we actually have just really opened back up for business again. So coming in and creating new additions to the menu and creating excitement. And it was just a lot of fun. So we're actually planning on hosting a sherry dinner is what we're going to do. Because from our experiments last night, which for he and I, it's pretty awesome, because we can sit and taste and talk and create these virtual pairings and tastings because we've worked together for so long. And so it's really exciting. Very, very exciting.
So, Richard, how about you? I mean, what was your first experience with sherry, and how do you present sherry to your customers?
Right. Well. Actually, my first experience with sherry was at my grandma's house when I was about like 6 or 7 years old. We would get a tiny little sip, and I was hooked from then. So, and then I'd pretend I'd dropped it, and I'd ask for some more. But so from a very early age, I got the bug. I fell in love with it. I'm now an addict for sherry. I love it so much, and all the different styles actually. Probably predominantly the dry ones, if I'm completely honest, but it depends what you're having. So how we presented at work at the Caminos. Actually, it's interesting what you say, Tonya, because at the Camino we absolutely differentiate between. We don't just put all the sherries in one space. We have the dry sherries as the aperitivos as the introduction, and actually we position those top left of the menu. So people's eyes are sort of drawn to the top right and top left-hand corners. So that's the first thing you should do while you're deciding what you're going to eat. Have some olives, have some almonds, and have a glass of sherry. So we really encourage that. We train the staff to do that. And then the sweet sherries are right next to the desserts. It makes perfect sense. At Pepito, which is the sort of dedicated sherry bar, across the courtyard at Camino King's Cross, which opened in 2010. There we have all the food has got a sherry match. We've got an introduction, like a crash course for sherries, for people who don't know really much about it, which is fine. We encourage it. We keep it simple. We don't even have a very long list. We have a list as diverse as possible, covering all the different styles, but as short as possible too, because we don't want to confuse people. So there's just about 20 sherries there in total. But you can have a crash course of sherry, which is 6 different sherries from the driest to the sweetest, each matched with a food item, like a little tapita. So that's the presentation. I hope that more or less answered the question, Carmen.
And yes, and how is this reaction? I mean, this first approach to a new consumer. I mean, what is their reaction?
Well, actually, last night I was with some friends at Pepito, and we had a big table, and some of them knew a little bit about sherry, but nobody else had a clue at all. I said, "Don't worry, let me just experiment on you." So we got started with some Fino, and then we had a flight. We have different flights of sherries as well. There's 5 different flights, so just a little taster of each, so you can compare the styles, which is just really fun. And that we give a complimentary tapita to go with that. And then we had, then I also got, to match the various different dishes we got, I got a bottle of Amontillado, and I put that on the table, just gave everyone a taster, and it went down really well. I was really pleased because it was rich, but super dry, and great with the dishes on a sort of what was a hot night that turned into like a thunderstorm. So it was all good.
Wow, right. And Antonia, sherry wines are different, very different from any other white wine in the world. So therefore, without any comparable organoleptic references. So in your experience, is this peculiar character to sherry is an advantage or a disadvantage?
It's an advantage, you know. Within tastings last night and putting together the menus, it became very clear to me the different flavor profiles and nuances that are there. Manzanilla, salty, earthy, citrus peel driven. The first thing that I thought of is, wow, I would love to have some oysters with this. But instead of having a mignonette sauce, having a little bit of a citrus grenité over with lemon peel. And someone just put in the chat, oysters. And I'm like, yes, And by the end of our conversation, I got Chef into it because he understood what I meant. With the right accoutrement, it absolutely works. Same thing with bone marrow and oloroso, mushrooms with oloroso. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's pretty amazing. And just the flavor profiles that come through. And you don't have to necessarily have dessert, with a cream sherry either. You can have an entire meal. Gorgonzola pizza with pears and with rosemary. Just divine. Absolutely delicious. Yeah.
And, how do you think, Tonia, we can attract new consumers, younger consumers to taste sherry wines?
I think inviting people into the conversation like we're doing right now and talking about what to do with sherry and what sherry tastes like. Everything that we've talked about today with what you're doing, Richard, offering flights of sherry, but almost putting in front of people and suggesting, hey, have some cheese, have some olives, have a little bit of sherry. A charcuterie plate with sherry. It's really, really fantastic. And the flavor profile cuts through all the richness and the fat of the meat and the texture. And it continues to make you hungry as well, which is what we want. We want people to come into where we are and enjoy their meal and have a great time. We're there to serve people and give them fantastic experiences. And that's what we can have with sherry.
And Richard, can you inspire us and share with us how you present sherry to your customers? by the glass, through cocktails, pairings, or matching dinners? I mean, what are your options, your best options?
Yes, yeah, definitely. The pairings are great. That little mini road trip I talked about before was 6 different sherries, so people can. I think the young people are like sort of more broad-minded than perhaps I was when I was that young. You know, I was pretty clueless when I was in my early 20s. But now people are they can be more knowledgeable, and they're prepared to experiment. And also when they recognize that the extraordinary quality that goes into sherry, now it's higher quality than ever, and the fact that it's such incredible value, and also, for me, without any question, the best food matching wine category on the planet. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of things there that are very exciting to stimulate people and inspire them. And you also mentioned the cocktails. Yeah, no doubt that it's a fantastic ingredient with such an array of flavors and styles and textures that can go into making cocktails really phenomenal. So mixologists have got very enthusiastic about that in recent years, and that's something there to stay. They found this new magic ingredient category with so many different styles. So they've experimented. And you see a lot of cocktail lists with different types of sherry in them as well, it's all good.
I like cocktails with sherry, but I'm also a purist. And so for me, it's sherry as itself in its purest form, and enjoying it with them.
To be honest, I'm with you, and it's the same with like sparkling wine. You know, I don't just like it in its pure form.
Yeah.
But I love the way that people are having fun with it as well and experimenting.
Yeah, that's necessary, of course. And there was a comment that raised a very interesting topic. Is that I mean, many pubs and bars and restaurants in the UK should be trained about sherry. I mean, knowledge is the key. And training the professionals. And Richard, talking about your experience, I mean, what training do you give to your teams? Because it's not easy to sell sherry to the customers.
Well, I do it. I do it myself, and I also get my suppliers to do it. So that there's some 2 different angles, and also repetition helps. And of course, just like trying it again and again, and trying the sherries with different foods, because it's so important to match it with food. That's what we do. That's what people do in Spain. That's what I've done every time I'm in Jerez, and which I'm dying to come back to, by the way. I can't wait till I can come down there again. But meanwhile, we have to emulate it in Spain. And we always try to match the correct dish. I experiment with my executive chef, and we're like, okay, we've got this new sherry. What do you think is going to go with that? So we come up with 3, 4, 5, 6 dishes, and we see which one is the best. So when you look at all the tapas on the Pepito menu, each one has an individual sherry match. And we think that's or style. They might just say fino rather than a specific fino. And this one might be Amontillado or also Dulce or whatever category. But that aspect is critical. So I like to do it myself. It's a lot of fun.
Well, Richard, Tonia, I'm very excited to announce that related to this last topic. This very last week, we launched the first online learning platform called sherryacademy.org, which is currently only available in Spanish, but in English will be launched very soon. So we hope this will help to spread the word about sherry, its versatility, and the capacity of enhancing the flavors. So, thank you very much to both of you. It was absolutely pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you so much for having me today. This was really wonderful. And that's great. Knowledge at your fingertips.
Yes. Thank you. We try to.
Thank you so much for inviting us. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fascinating listening to everybody else as well.
Yes.
Salud.
Charles,
Salud.
take
Muchísimas
care.
gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you for joining us. And well, thank you to everyone who is watching, and thank you to all the guests for joining us in this Wine on Earth Taste-a-Thon. On behalf of the Consejo Regulador and Wine on Earth and our presenters, thank you. Cheers to all sherry lovers around the world. Salud and enjoy. Bye-bye.